All right, let's jump into this deep dive. We're going full wilderness mode today, exploring the world of bushcraft.
Awesome.
We've got these excerpts from Dave Canterbury's Bushcraft 101 that you sent in.
A classic.
Yeah, ready to unpack some survival wisdom, see what Canterbury's all about?
Definitely. Bushcraft's always fascinating. Self-reliance, resourcefulness, connecting with nature, it's all in there.
Right from the start, Canterbury hits us with his 5 Cs of Survival.
Yeah,
It's this framework for prioritizing the essentials when you're out in the wild.
definitely.
Like, picture yourself heading out for your first solo overnight trip. What are the absolute must-haves in your pack?
That's where the 5 Cs are so helpful. It breaks down wilderness preparedness into manageable categories.
Makes it less overwhelming.
Exactly. Each C is a critical area to focus on, starting with cutting tools.
And Canterbury doesn't mince words about a good knife. Calls it your lifeline in an emergency.
Oh yeah, he's all about the knife.
Why do you think he put so much emphasis on that?
Well, in bushcraft, your knife isn't just for cutting food. You use it for everything. Building, crafting, preparing, even defense, if it comes down to it.
So it's like the ultimate multi-tool.
Pretty much, yeah. Canterbury suggests a blade length between 4.5 and 6 inches.
Okay.
That way it's robust enough for processing wood, but still good for finer tasks, like food prep.
So you're not looking for a bunch of specialized tools, just one that can handle it all.
Yeah, one solid knife.
Next up is cover. Canterbury talks about creating this microclimate of protection.
Right, think of it like this. Your shelter's your first line of defense against the elements.
More than just staying dry.
Yeah, it's about regulating body temperature, having that safe haven.
And we're not talking pitching a fancy tent here.
Nope.
Canterbury focuses on building from scratch using natural materials.
Exactly, working with what you find.
What kinds of shelters does he actually walk you through?
He covers it all. Simple lean-tos, more elaborate debris huts.
Hmm.
He stresses choosing the right shelter type based on your environment. Yeah, and the materials you have on hand.
It's pretty amazing what you can build with a little know-how.
Oh, definitely. Human ingenuity at its finest.
Then we've got combustion. This is where Canterbury says, fire is life.
Can't argue with that. Fire is essential out there.
What does it provide?
Warmth, light, the ability to cook food, even just psychological comfort, you know?
Yeah, it makes you feel safe.
Totally. Mastery of fire starting is empowering in the wilderness.
He goes through both modern and primitive techniques.
He does.
What are some of the methods he's a fan of?
Well, Canterbury is a big proponent of the ferrocerium rod or ferro rod.
Okay.
Super reliable even when it's damp out. But he also gets into friction fire, using a bow drill, hand drill, those kinds of things.
That's the stuff that always seems almost magical.
It is, connecting with the practices of our ancestors.
I love that. All right, 4th C is containers. Might seem obvious,
It does.
but why does Canterbury emphasize it so much?
Because you can't survive long without water. Having dependable containers for collecting it, transporting it, purifying it, absolutely essential.
But he goes beyond just your typical store-bought canteen.
He does. He even shows you how to make containers from natural materials.
It's that whole bushcraft ethos.
Exactly. Use what's around you.
Then the last C is cordage.
Ah, cordage. It's surprisingly versatile.
Canterbury calls it the duct tape of the wilderness. I love that. Earlier, you mentioned the Alice pack. Canterbury recommends modifying one for bushcraft.
He does.
But isn't that pack frame kind of outdated? Wouldn't a modern hiking pack be more comfortable?
Maybe more comfortable, sure. But the Alice frame is just so durable.
You can really beat it up.
Exactly. And adaptable. Canterbury shows you how to customize it with a simple canvas haversack.
Okay, what's good about that?
Well, it's lightweight, doesn't break the bank, and you'd be surprised how much it holds. Plus, so much easier to repair in the field, compared to a modern pack with all its zippers and buckles.
That's a good point.
And of course, you'll need a waterproof bag inside to protect your essentials from the elements.
So choosing gear that's both functional, durable, but also simple enough to fix if something goes wrong.
Exactly. Those are the priorities.
Speaking of essentials, let's talk more about knives.
All right, let's get into it.
Canterbury really goes in-depth on knife selection.
He does.
What are some of the key things he highlights?
Well, we touched on blade length earlier, but he's also a big believer in choosing the right steel type.
Okay, what is he like?
He's a big fan of high-carbon steel. It's tough, easy to sharpen in the field, just using a natural sharpening stone.
So it's more practical for bushcraft than, say, stainless steel.
Yeah, even though stainless is less prone to rust,
Interesting.
because stainless can be a real pain to sharpen out in the wilderness. and a dull knife.
Dangerous.
Yeah, inefficient and dangerous.
Mm.
He also talks about the importance of a full tang.
Which is?
That's where the steel of the blade extends all the way through the handle.
Oh,
Gives you that strength, that durability. You want a knife that won't break on you.
Then he gets into all the different knife grinds.
The grinds.
He seems to favor the Scandinavian grind, but there are so many.
There are.
Can you explain what exactly is a grind? Why is it so important?
Think of it this way. The grind determines how the blade slices through material.
Yeah.
It's all about the shape of the blade's cross-section.
Gotcha.
So a Scandinavian grind with its sharp, acute angle,
Yeah.
excellent for slicing wood, while a convex grind is more rounded, better for heavy-duty chopping, batoning. Canterbury goes through all the pros and cons of each one.
So you can make an informed decision.
Exactly. Choose the right knife for what you need it to do.
Fascinating how much thought goes into picking the right knife for bushcraft.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just about grabbing whatever looks coolest at the store.
Nope, not at all.
But even the best knife is useless if you don't know how to use it safely and effectively.
That's the truth. And Canterbury provides some really detailed instructions on safe handling techniques
Okay, good.
and essential cutting techniques. Batoning, creating different notches for different tasks.
Safety first, always. Speaking of essential skills, let's talk knots. Canterbury calls them the building blocks of bushcraft.
He's not wrong.
What makes knots so important out in the wilderness?
Think about all the things you need them for. Building shelters, setting traps, securing gear. You can even create tools using knots.
It's amazing how such a simple thing can be so versatile.
Right. And Canterbury focuses on mastering a few key knots that every bushcrafter should know. The bowline, the lark's head, the timber hitch, and the clove hitch.
Gotta have those down.
Yeah, each one has unique properties that make it perfect for specific tasks.
So we've covered the 5 Cs of survival, talked about building a basic bushcraft kit, touched on knives and knots. Where do we go from here?
Well, we've got our shelter, our fire, some basic tools. But what about food?
Ah.
And in the next part, we'll get into Canterbury's insights on finding and processing food in the wild. Trapping, foraging, fishing, the whole works.
Sounds like we're in for a wilderness feast.
I think so. Back for more bushcraft goodness.
I am. All right, good.
Ready to get into the nitty-gritty.
Let's get practical. In the last part, you mentioned Canterbury gets pretty deep into knife techniques.
Yeah, he goes way beyond just basic cutting.
What kind of skills does he focus on?
Well, there's batoning,
Batoning.
which is essential for splitting wood,
Yeah.
for your fire, shelter building, all that.
Yeah, how do you do that?
Use a stick, called a baton,
Oh, I see.
to strike the spine of your knife, drive it through a piece of wood.
So you're not like chopping.
So, no, it's
more controlled.
Exactly. It's for creating smaller pieces of kindling, especially if the wood's a bit damp on the outside.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, dry on the inside. Canterbury emphasizes using a hardwood baton, though. Avoid splinters
Good tip.
and always baton on a stable base. Protect your knife.
You don't want to damage it.
No way. It's your lifeline out there, remember?
That's right. He said that. So batoning, it's like a test of your knife skills.
It is, and your patience.
Does he cover any other techniques?
He does. There are different grips for various tasks,
Okay.
like the chest lever grip.
Chest lever.
Yeah, it's great for removing larger amounts of material safely.
Safely.
Yeah, especially when there are others around.
Makes sense.
So you hold the knife away from your body, use your back muscles for leverage, almost like doing chicken wings, you know.
Oh, I see.
All about maintaining control.
Keeping the blade away from you.
Exactly. And anyone else nearby.
Safety first.
Always.
Canterbury also goes into detail about carving different types of notches.
Oh yeah, the notches.
Why are those so important?
Essential for building shelters, setting traps, even making tools.
So many uses.
He explains how to create stake notches, V-notches,
Okay.
even the versatile log cabin notch.
What's that one for?
You can actually use it to create a makeshift anvil in a fallen tree.
Huh. Clever.
Right. It's amazing what you can do with a few well-placed notches.
Canterbury seems to be a big fan of saws, too.
Oh yeah, saws are great.
What kind does he recommend? And why?
He often recommends the Baco Laplander folding saw.
Okay.
It's lightweight, compact.
Easy to carry.
Exactly. And it's surprisingly effective for its size. Canterbury even suggests that for folks who are less experienced with an axe, a saw can be a safer, more precise tool for cutting wood.
So it's a good option for beginners?
Yeah, less intimidating maybe.
But he also mentions using a saw for splitting branches.
He does.
How does that even work?
It's a technique where you make a cut partway through the branch with the saw.
Okay.
Then you carefully use the saw to pry the branch apart.
Oh, I see.
It's a great way to create smaller pieces of firewood without needing an axe.
Clever.
But of course, he emphasizes saw safety too.
Always.
Keep your free hand through the frame, prevent it from jumping out of the cut,
Right. Important.
and keep the blade oiled, the teeth properly set
Yeah.
for optimal performance.
So there's maintenance involved.
There is.
Now let's talk about axes. Those seem like an essential tool for any serious bushcrafter.
Their icon.
What types does Canterbury recommend?
He covers tomahawks, belt axes, which are also known as hatchets,
Okay.
and then your full-size axes.
So there's a range.
There is.
What does he say about them?
Well, he highlights the historical significance, especially of the tomahawk.
You know, thinking back to our forefathers.
Exactly. It was a true multi-tool back in the day.
What made it so versatile?
Well, you can actually remove the head
Oh, wow.
from the handle and use it for tasks like scraping, skinning.
Interesting.
You can even use it as a wedge for splitting logs.
Huh. Who knew?
Canterbury also stresses choosing an axe with a wooden handle
Why is that?
so that you can replace it in the field if you need to.
That's a good point. So it's not just about the blade.
Nope.
The handle's important too.
Absolutely. And of course, he goes into axe safety.
Always safety.
He emphasizes establishing a safe zone around you before you even think about felling a tree.
Makes sense.
Yeah, make sure there's no obstacles in the path of that falling tree.
You don't want any surprises.
No. He also recommends the reach-around test for choosing trees of a safe size to fell.
What's that?
If you can hug the tree and touch your opposite shoulder,
Okay.
it's generally considered safe to tackle alone.
Oh, that's a good rule of thumb.
Right. Being aware of your surroundings, working within your skill level, super important when you're dealing with an axe.
Does he talk about technique at all?
Oh yeah, he covers techniques for bucking, notching,
Okay.
even batoning with an axe. And just like with knives and saws, he stresses proper care and sharpening.
Makes sense.
He recommends using a carborundum stone or a Lansky puck for sharpening.
Okay.
And remind us that a dull axe is not only inefficient, but dangerous.
Dangerous.
You bet.
All right, we've talked a lot about tools. Let's switch gears and talk about cordage.
Ah, cordage.
You mentioned earlier that Canterbury calls it the duct tape of the wilderness.
I love that analogy.
What kind of cordage does he actually recommend carrying?
Well, he suggests having a variety,
Okay.
including Mariner's tarred twisted nylon twine for its strength, water resistance,
Good in the wild.
hemp rope for its natural durability,
Makes sense.
tubular webbing, super versatile, even mule tape for heavy-duty hauling.
Wow. So many options.
But Canterbury doesn't stop at store-bought.
Of course not.
He provides instructions on making cordage from natural materials.
I remember reading about his reverse wrap two-ply cordage technique.
Yeah, that one's cool.
What's it all about?
It's a method for creating strong, durable cordage using the inner bark of trees,
Okay, what kind of trees?
like shagbark hickory, tulip poplar. They have this strong, fibrous bark that can be twisted and plied to create surprisingly strong cordage.
It's amazing what you can do with natural materials.
It really is. But cordage is only useful if you know how to tie it right.
That's right. Gotta know your knots.
Canterbury covers a wide range of knots.
We touched on a few earlier.
We did.
What else does he go into?
He highlights the bowline for its secure loop that won't slip, the lark's head for attaching cordage to a fixed object, the jam knot for creating a stopper knot,
Gotcha.
the trucker's hitch for tightening a line, the prusik knot for ascending a rope,
Whoa, that's getting advanced.
the fisherman's knot for joining two lines together,
Yeah.
the timber hitch for securing a rope to a log, and the clove hitch for attaching a rope to a pole or branch.
It's like a whole new language.
It is, but a valuable one to learn.
He really stresses practice, though, right?
Oh, yeah. Practice makes perfect, especially when it comes to knots,
You got to be able to tie them quickly and reliably.
especially out in the wilderness.
No time for fumbling around.
Exactly. Now let's move on to shelter building.
Okay, good.
Canterbury goes into different types of tarps and tarp tents.
Okay.
He seems to prefer canvas tarps for their durability.
They're tough.
They are. He even provides instructions on making a simple tarp tent from a painter's drop cloth.
That's resourceful.
Right, making do with what you have. He also talks about ground pads,
Okay.
browse bags, sleeping bags,
What's a browse bag?
like a stuff sack filled with natural materials for insulation, like leaves, pine needles.
Oh, interesting.
Canterbury seems to favor the military modular sleep system, or MSS,
Okay.
for its reliability, its weatherproof qualities,
Good for cold conditions.
especially for cold conditions, yeah. But he doesn't just rely on modern gear.
No, we've talked about that.
He covers different types of natural shelters, too. Lean-tos, A-frames, debris huts, that kind of thing.
Building a shelter from scratch seems pretty daunting.
It can be.
What are some of the key things to think about when choosing a shelter type?
Canterbury emphasizes assessing the weather conditions,
Makes sense.
the availability of materials in your environment.
Yeah.
So a lean-to might be good for a short stay in mild weather,
Okay.
while a debris hut offers more insulation, protection in colder climates.
Interesting.
He also stresses choosing a location that's safe from hazards,
Hazards like what?
like falling trees, flash floods, that kind of thing.
So it's all about being aware of your surroundings.
Exactly. Making informed decisions based on your specific situation.
Now let's get fired up. Literally.
Let's talk fire starting.
What techniques does Canterbury cover in this area?
He gives a pretty comprehensive guide to both modern and primitive methods.
Okay.
Everything from using lighters for cerium rods, which we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
to mastering friction fire methods, like the bow drill, the hand drill.
I remember reading about his description of the bird's nest and tinder bundle.
Oh yeah, those are essential.
Can you explain what those are? Why are they so important?
They're crucial for getting a flame going.
Okay.
The bird's nest is a collection of fine, fluffy tinder, like dry grass, shredded bark, something that'll easily catch a spark.
Okay.
And the tinder bundle is a slightly larger bundle of dry twigs, branches.
To get the fire going.
Exactly. Provides the initial fuel, the structure for the fire.
Mm.
Canterbury also covers different types of fire lays.
Like.
The teepee fire for its efficiency,
Okay.
the log cabin fire for its stability, the long fire for its sustained heat, the Dakota fire pit for its concealed flames, the keyhole fire for its versatile cooking capabilities.
It's amazing how much strategy goes into building a fire.
It really is. And Canterbury also stresses fire safety,
Of course.
always ensuring adequate ventilation,
Right.
choosing a location away from flammable materials.
You don't want to start a forest fire.
No, definitely not. Speaking of choosing a location, Canterbury has this great framework for selecting a campsite. He calls it the 4Ws.
The 4 Ws?
Yeah, have you heard of that?
No, tell me more.
They stand for wood, water, wind, and widowmakers.
Widowmaker.
Sounds ominous, right?
Yeah, what are those?
He's talking about dead trees, branches that could fall and cause injury.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So the 4Ws framework encourages you to assess a few things before choosing a spot.
Like what?
Availability of firewood, a nearby water source, the prevailing wind direction,
Okay.
and of course the presence of any overhead hazards, like those widowmakers.
So it's all about being observant and prioritizing safety.
Exactly. All right, so we've built our shelter.
Yeah.
Got a roaring fire going.
Feeling good.
Feeling pretty comfortable. But our stomachs are starting to rumble.
Gotta eat.
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
In the next part, we'll explore Canterbury's insights on finding food in the wild.
Okay.
Everything from foraging for edible plants, to setting traps, to fishing with improvised tools.
I'm hungry already. All right, final part of our bushcraft deep dive.
It's gone by fast.
It has. We've covered so much.
From the basics to some pretty advanced stuff.
Yeah, feeling ready to tackle the wilderness now.
I think so.
In the last part, you teased some really interesting insights on finding food in the wild.
Ah, yes, time to get into the real survival stuff.
Canterbury covers it all. Foraging, trapping, fishing. Where do we even begin?
Let's start with what's readily available, the plants all around us.
Okay, good place to start.
Canterbury highlights a bunch of useful trees: pines, willows, poplars, even black walnut, sassafras, oaks. He points out that these trees aren't just good for shelter and fire building.
No,
Many of them have potential medicinal benefits, too.
it's like, nature's pharmacy.
Exactly. Right outside our doors.
Can you give some examples of these plant allies and their uses?
Sure. Take white pine. The needles can be brewed into a vitamin C-rich tea,
I've heard of that.
and the sap can be used as an antiseptic and adhesive.
Huh, interesting.
Willow bark has pain-relieving properties,
Oh, yeah, like aspirin.
similar to aspirin, right?
Oh,
Can be a real lifesaver in the wilderness.
yeah,
Sassafras makes a delicious tea
okay.
and has medicinal properties. And white oak is super versatile
Mm.
for treating all sorts of ailments.
So by learning to identify and use these plants, we're not just surviving, we're potentially thriving.
Exactly.
But what about when plant-based food isn't enough?
That's when we might need to turn to other options.
Canterbury gets into trapping, which always seemed like a pretty complex skill set to me.
It can.
What are some of the key principles he outlines?
He starts with the basics, explaining the different components of a trap, like the trigger, the lever, the engine.
Okay.
Then he breaks down the different types. Foothold traps, snares, body grip traps, even primitive traps made from natural materials.
So many options.
There are.
What are some of the key things to keep in mind when setting traps effectively?
Canterbury emphasizes understanding animal behavior,
Oh, that's smart.
using that knowledge to your advantage, choosing the right location, creating a trap bed that blends in with the environment, using the right bait for the animal you're targeting.
So it's not just about setting the trap.
No, it's about the whole setup.
He even gives tips on digging a trap bed
He does.
and using techniques like offset to increase your chances of a catch.
Yeah, it's about being observant, patient, adaptable.
It's skill.
It is. Canterbury also talks about water trapping,
Okay.
highlighting the simplicity and effectiveness of pocket sets and caster mound sets for catching animals like beaver and mink. I remember reading about his description of the squirrel pull set.
Oh, yeah, that one sounded so clever.
It's ingenious.
Right.
Can you explain it?
You essentially create a path of least resistance for squirrels to travel along,
Okay.
funneling them towards strategically placed snares.
So you're using their natural behavior against them.
Exactly. It's all about understanding animal behavior, using natural features to your advantage.
Clever. Now let's say we've successfully caught some game. Time for a feast.
Canterbury doesn't shy away from the details of processing it, does he?
He does not.
What does he cover?
He gives clear instructions on how to process small mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, even amphibians.
No, that's a lot.
He emphasizes removing the guts and anal tract.
For sanitary reasons.
Right, essential for avoiding contamination. He also offers detailed tips on skinning, cleaning, and preparing different types of game.
So it's a whole process.
It is. And he even covers methods for preserving meat.
Yeah.
Drying, smoking. Those are essential skills for extending your food supply in the wilderness.
So you're not just catching it, you're making it last.
Exactly. Thinking long term.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about fishing.
That's right.
Canterbury goes beyond just your fancy rods and reels.
He does.
He talks about crafting improvised rods from materials like bamboo or river cane.
Makeshift fishing pole?
Pretty much, yeah. He also introduces tenkara.
Tenkara?
It's a Japanese fishing technique
Okay.
known for its simplicity and efficiency. Uses a long, flexible rod, a fixed line, and a simple fly.
I remember reading about the Lillian braid system
Oh,
for
yeah.
quickly changing fishing lines on a tenkara rod.
Such a clever system.
So simple but effective.
Exactly. And Canterbury emphasizes that tenkara is more than just a technique.
It's a philosophy.
It is. It's about connecting with nature.
Experiencing the tranquility of fishing in its purest form.
That's a good way to put it. We've explored so much, from the essential gear and skills to those advanced techniques for finding food and shelter. What are some of the deeper takeaways that you think Canterbury wants us to understand?
Yeah, what's the bigger picture here?
I think he's challenging us to reconnect with nature.
In a meaningful way.
Yeah, to see the world around us not as just a collection of resources, but as a complex web of interconnectedness that we're a part of.
We're not separate from it.
Exactly. He wants us to develop a sense of place, appreciate the subtle signs of nature, find joy in the simplicity of self-reliance.
He also stresses the importance of knowledge and practice.
Oh yeah, he wants us to get out there, experiment, make mistakes, learn from our experiences.
Not just about reading the book.
No, it's about getting your hands dirty, trying things out. Bushcraft's not a spectator sport.
So what would you say is the most valuable tool a bushcrafter can possess?
It's not a knife or a saw or a fire starter.
Okay.
It's the ability to think critically.
To problem solve.
Exactly. Adapt to changing circumstances.
Yeah.
Embrace that mindset of resourcefulness, resilience, and a willingness to learn from the land.
Canterbury reminds us that bushcraft is ultimately a journey, not a destination.
There's always more to learn.
More to explore, more to discover in the wild world around us.
So what aspect of bushcraft are you most drawn to? How can you explore it further? Whether it's mastering a new knot, building a shelter, identifying edible plants, or just spending more time observing nature, there's a whole universe of bushcraft out there waiting to be discovered.
This deep dive has been a fascinating exploration of bushcraft, and I hope it's inspired you to embark on your own wilderness adventures. So go out there, explore, experiment, and discover the joys of connecting with nature on a deeper level. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.